So we're at LANet. We've reviewed hundreds of Azure cloud environments, reviewed and built them, and we see some common patterns where customers are spending way too much than they should be on their cloud infrastructure. Um, One of the key areas is no proper access control. So we've got some more slides going into what happens when these things are not there. What are the actual results of these things? Just to give an example, to start with, no proper access control. The wrong people have got um, access to the whole environment, which they may not need. And when I say the wrong people, as in people who are not fully trained in the environment and are just sometimes building things just to test and leave it there. So we do need some kind of controls in there, and access control basically. And then we've got housekeeping and governance. So without proper housekeeping and governance, we can then also have issues in there, which we'll look at in a moment. Oversized VM instances and PaaS resources, plus people using the defaults. Lack of automation, no regular monitoring or proper visibility, so people don't always know what's in their cloud environment. So they're spending money on things they don't really know what's there, and sometimes they're just scared to touch it and they just leave it running, and they end up paying unnecessarily for that. So and also then just continuing to add infrastructure without putting the correct structure and governance and guardrails in place is going to just continually compound the issue as well. So we'll take a look at some of that shortly. Okay, why do we need to do something about it really? Because costs can continue to rise, and if you're not managing your costs or your security, you're going to have problems like overspending. That projects are going to be cancelled, and projects that are actually going to help move your business forward will get cancelled. Limited or no progress or use of cloud adoption. So we've come into the world of cloud computing. The business is right. Let's take advantage of this. Things like the security, the reliability, the capacity, the ability to spin things up quickly. All those things kind of stop when people start to use it in the incorrect way, see that, oh, they're spending way too much, and then they just put the brakes on, and then they lose all those advantages of using the cloud. And of course, data breaches as well. So if you're not keeping an eye on your security as well, some of the default settings and those kind of things can also lead to unwanted access to your environment. So now we talk about some of the common causes and effects, which is what I alluded to earlier. So without having proper governance in place, users are given too much access and they can go and pretty much do whatever they want on the platform. You can control that by guardrails, governance guardrails. In an Azure, it's called Azure policy, and we can put guardrails in there and to control what people can and can't do, what size resources they can build, where they can build those resources, and then that coupled with proper access control only makes sure the right people have got the right level of access. So there's built-in roles that we can use, and also fine-tune those roles using custom roles, just to give the people just the exact access that they need, and not too much more and not any less either. Okay. Without that, there is no restrictions in place, and you're going to get huge bills because there's nothing in the platform stopping people to go and spin up massive data warehouse environments, for example. So there's nothing to stop them doing that without the proper guardrails that you've got to put in. Visibility and monitoring is another problem that we see. So people don't always know what's in their environment, and that's because they don't really add things like tagging, or they don't organize a structure of those resources and the subscriptions correctly. So they don't know which department is looking after certain resources, who's the owner of them, who's the data owner. So then sometimes what we see is people just leave them there, and because they don't know who they belong to, they're just scared to touch it and they just leave it and they just carry on paying for it. So what you need is make sure you've got a good tagging policies in place as well, so where you can see who's the owner, what department it belongs to, what service it is, even kind of uptime requirements. And then you can report on those things. You can also put policies in place to highlight anywhere where these tags are missing as well. Okay, and ongoing management and reporting can help identify some of these resources and all your resources. So you have your ongoing cost reporting, which can show exactly where costs are attributed to which people and which departments. So that's why tagging is really important. oversized resources and no automation. So sometimes using the incorrect or default settings can cause extra spend as well. So be careful with some of the defaults. If you're just flying through the portal, for example, which ideally you won't be doing, but sometimes people do, you would go and create a VM. It'll create maybe a larger machine that you need to. It might give you premium disks. If you're creating a SQL Server database, for example, it might give you a vCore instance, and we see that a lot where people have just gone and create, I want a database. They're just messing about with it, testing it, and basically they've got a $300 a month database just sitting there for no reason. There's a zero usage, and that can sit there for months and years, and people just don't notice these things, and those are the kind of things that we look for as well. Plus security defaults as well. Again, without any guardrails in place, it's going to let you open up those databases, storage accounts, virtual machines, open up to the internet. So that's where you want to make sure you've got your guardrails in place as well, and also poor or no scaling rules. So you've got things like databases, VM scale sets, web applications, for example. What we see is people scaling them up to accommodate the maximum usage, the peak usage times, but then they don't scale them back down again. So again, there's a lot of wasted money in there, and we've done quite a bit of automation work around that as well, which we'll come on to in a little while as well. Okay, so just a quick note on who we are. So we're at LA We build secure, resilient platforms, and we're all up. You can read about us on that slide and follow us on our LinkedIn page. We put all our content and videos and all kinds of stuff on our LinkedIn page, and we have got a new website as well at lanet.co.uk, as you can see on the screen. But I mean, our main mission is really to help customers optimize their cloud infrastructure, so they're not wasting money and they are staying secure as well, because we see a lot of environments that are far from that. So we kind of make it our mission to help our customers to save money. Okay, you can see some of our customers, for example, as well. NHS Trust, Simply Health. So we are building environments, really high security environments. That what we want is to build environments that just do not go down, and we don't have hundreds of support tickets because we put it in correctly and it just works. So that's kind of what we aim to achieve. And I'll hand over to Connor for the next section. Thank you very much, Connor. Take it away.
Yeah, so kind of here we want to start talking about how we can start saving money and the mechanisms we can use and the things we can do within Azure to save you that money. So looking at the top one here, and how we've kind of saved money for our customers and clients is by choosing the optimal subscription for them. So by sort of default in Azure, if you're just setting up an account and creating a subscription, you'll probably get a pay-as-you-go subscription. This is just paying the base terms of the Microsoft prices for anything you put in there, if it's storage, virtual machines, databases. However, you can look to work with a CSP to get a CSP-based subscription or a dev test subscription, and these can save you, upwards of 10+% for your customers, or for your subscription. Sorry. And that's just across your entire Azure spend. So that's really, really big and really, really important, and a good way to start, because you kind of want to get those in place at the beginning before you start building up a ton of resources within your environment. Next up, we have housekeeping. So, it's kind of simple as it sounds. Just going through the environment, as Mitesh sort of picked up earlier, but databases just left running, resources just sitting there with no owners. Previous owners have maybe left the company, just left the resources there. So going through your environment, doing some housekeeping. I know when we've done it for our customers, we've saved 25% of their overall Azure spend, just because they had a bunch of resources sitting in the background, not doing anything, running, costing them money that they didn't really actually realize they were there. So super important to do housekeeping. The big one, of course, saving plans and reservations. So with saving plans and reservations, these are things you can put on to compute resources. So things like virtual machines and app services and databases to sort of reserve compute time and compute spend on those things over the course of a year or 3 years. And that can dramatically reduce the cost of your Azure spend. You can bring down 60-70% of the cost of some of those resources across multiple years, and we'll go into a really, really good example of that in the next slide. For automation, again, we can resize databases at peak times. So if we're using automation, we can take those databases that may need to be, larger databases at peak, and on off-peak hours, maybe during the night or weekends, depending on when they're not used, we can use automation to reduce the SKU and size of those databases to save quite a lot of money. And we've saved, customers 30% of those database spends by doing something like this. The sort of other side of this coin is a serverless SQL server option. So if you can go with serverless SQL, that has a lot of really nice features already built in there that essentially will turn the database off when it's not in use, or when it's a very low traffic. So again, that you'd save upwards of 50% with those serverless. So if you can move to a serverless SQL database, big savings there for your database spends. And of course, application and database optimization. This is just really about making sure that your app is running as well as it can, isn't using too many resources, isn't just drawing compute power when it shouldn't have to. Because again, the less compute you're using, the more money you're saving. So the more optimized your app or your database is, the better time you're going to have. And so here's this real world example for reservations. You can find this on our blog. So if you head to lanet.co.uk/blog and look at the how to reduce Azure costs with reserved instances, you'll be able to find this blog page. And so what we can see here is even in just the central US alone, and this is one of our customers that we helped, they were going to spend £165,000 across 3 years in the central US region. And by utilizing reserved instances, we brought that down to 35,000. And you can see with the two different regions there, overall, across those two different regions, we saved them just under £250,000 across 3 years in dollars, and £176,000 across 3 years. So you can really see how much money you can save by putting these reserved instances in place. It's really a no-brainer not to use these. Other ways, of course, is hybrid use benefits. So this is about bringing the licenses you have on premises and bringing them up into the cloud. So it's about not rebuying those licenses. I'm sure anyone who's worked on prem, there's a lot of databases on prem, has bought a lot of licenses or know how expensive a lot of those licenses are. With hybrid use benefit in Azure, you can bring those licenses up into the cloud to make sure you're not having to spend that money again. So super important to use that. Next up, we have right sizing. So what do we mean by right sizing? I think Mitesh touched on that a little bit as well when he was talking about his slides. And it's about having the right size, compute power to the application you're running on it, or the right size database to what you're running on it. So if it's a dev test environment, and dev test database or resource, we're probably going to be looking to have a smaller, more dev-focused SKU on that database, and not some big production database that's going to be costing you a lot more money just sitting there running, when you could SKU much more smaller and SKU to your size. So really important. We've done that a lot for customers where we go on and we see how they're using their resources, and a lot of times, especially with the Azure defaults, they're going to suggest a lot higher SKUs and a lot bigger sizes for these resources than you probably require. So super important to get the right size resource in there. And next up we have alerts, and I'm just going to hand over to Adam, who's going to discuss you through some alerts and monitoring aspects and how you can save money that way. So Adam, yeah, take it away.
Nice one. Thanks, Connor. Yeah, so alerts in general, really important thing to have across your environment, but specifically looking at cost management, we can put in cost management alerts and budget alerts. So cost management alerts, we can basically set up notifications for spikes in your budget, spikes in costs. So whether that's on a specific resource group, subscriptions, if for some reason there's a load more usage one month, you can set up an alert so that you will be notified either by email or by text message even, just so you can get on top of that as it happens, rather than waiting until the end of the month where you get that bill and you see, oh, suddenly you spent £200 extra on a VM that you didn't expect. Well, with these alerts, you'll get a notification when that happens, so you can address it at the time. So it will learn those usage patterns and send you those notifications. So it's really useful. Looking at budget alerts specifically, we can set up budgets for either specific resources, resource groups, subscriptions again. And when you're getting close to using all of that budget, we can send a notification just so you know how much of that budget you've used for the month. Say you've spun up a couple of new resources and you're getting close to that budget threshold, you'll know in advance rather than, again, getting that big bill at the end of the month. So really useful tools, basically just helps you keep on top of it rather than being reactive. It helps you be proactive. So another couple of bits that we can do, looking to save costs around automation. So for compute resources, we can look at scheduled shutdowns. So we can set specific times that VMs or other resources are either online or offline. So it's really useful in development environments or testing environments where machines don't need to be on 24/7. You don't need those computers to be on all the time. So say you had some dev machines that were spun up as needed. The devs go in and turn them on, but end of the day, they forgot to turn them off. You can have a scheduled shutdown, so 7 p.m. it will shut down all those VMs regardless, and just make sure you're not wasting any costs there. So yeah, great tool there. We can also look at auto pause. So with serverless SQL databases, they can be set to automatically pause when they're not active, when they're not receiving any data or receiving any requests from applications and things like that. So just saving some costs there again when it's not in use, so really helpful. And we can also use automation accounts and custom scripts to resize workloads, select different SKUs based on whether they're receiving traffic or not, whether they're in use. And there's loads of other bits you can do with sort of custom scripts and custom automation runbooks and things like that to really tailor that automation to your environment and make sure if there's any areas you can save costs in, that the automation is working for you and doing that in the background and making sure you can save that money. So rather than sort of specific bits that we can do within an environment, we also have the Azure pricing calculator, which is a tool from Microsoft. So it's really simple, easy to use tool that you can use to check prices of resources in Azure. So it's got all of the resources in there that are in Azure. So all of your VMs, all the different SKUs, different databases, different storage, different automation bits and pieces. So all of the resources are in there. They all have their different settings. They have the hybrid use benefits, the reservation plans. All of those different settings are available in there for you to choose. So you input your resources, and then it basically gives you an estimate of what that resource would cost within your environment. So it's really great for planning new environments or planning changes to your environment, or just seeing how maybe some different VM SKUs for some existing infrastructure, how those SKUs would affect your costs overall. So we've got a video on our YouTube channel sort of taking us on a walkthrough of the calculator with a real world example, putting a couple of resources in there and sort of seeing how the estimate works and how to understand that estimate that it gives you. So if you're interested in learning more, basically head over to our YouTube channel and check out that video. So another thing that we've briefly mentioned is housekeeping. So it's something that we see customers forgetting time and time again, just to do that housekeeping and go through your resources and keep your environment just in the best shape it can be. And it's something that we always go through and do first on an environment. So there's a couple of different bits within housekeeping that we think are sort of really important. So the first of which being tagging. So making sure your resources have tags on them. So just adding that additional metadata to those resources so you can easily identify them. And then within cost analysis, you can basically filter on those metrics and you can filter on those tags and get an idea of exactly where those costs are going by those tagged resources. So it's really helpful for visibility and really great for breaking down in reports and analysis and stuff like that. So really helpful tool. The next thing that we look at is making sure that any old resources or any resources that aren't in use are deleted or shut down. So there's absolutely no point in spending out on something that isn't in use, and it's something that people time and time again forget to go through and do. So we just go through and make sure that any VMs or any databases that aren't in use, any app services, anything like that, they're either deleted or archived or shut down, just to make sure that you're not spending out on that, really. The other thing that we look at is policy and alerts. So we make sure you've got alerts in there for visibility of your resources and visibility over what they're doing, and making sure you're getting up-to-date information from those alerts. And then also we make sure that policies are in place to restrict SKUs on certain resources and to restrict regional deployments to only allowed regions, just to make sure that people can't go in and just deploy sort of really high VM SKU, something with a load of GPUs, a load of memory, that's going to rack up a massive bill at the end of the month. Just make sure that people can't go in and deploy resources like that without them being explicitly allowed. And just make sure you're in more control and you've got peace of mind that that's not going to go on in the background within your environment. So again, we've got a video on our YouTube channel specifically about Azure policy, going through what policies might be good for your environment, sort of how to use policy, how to understand it. So yeah, if you want to learn more about policy, head to our YouTube channel. So we're just going to hand it back over to Mitesh now, who's going to speak a little bit about business and process.
Brilliant. Thank you very much, Adam. And while we're at it, we might as well say congrats to Connor again on passing your exam. So yeah, so what we're talking about here is some business process. So we've talked about some of the technical things that we can use to help save money on our Azure cloud, but there's some general guidelines that we also see that help with cost and overall cost and total cost of ownership with running IT systems and IT departments. One way is to keep things simple, so don't have multiple complex systems which which can get expensive, and you may only use or need 80% of what they do, but you're paying that premium for that extra 20% of that software or system which you may probably never use. Minimize customizations and custom software where possible. When you have this kind of stuff, you have like little pockets of knowledge in your environment, in your teams as well, which can get quite expensive for ongoing maintenance of that as well. Use SaaS solutions as well, software as a service, so you don't have to worry about the running of the infrastructure that sits behind the service that you're purchasing. And then looking at other ways to reduce TCO, and this is kind of reducing support calls. Make sure your IT staff are trained well, and also your users as well. So a good way to do that is have really good documentation, knowledge base, and also videos are a really good way to train your staff as well. So and then focus on root cause analysis. So when you're seeing the same problems happening again and again, try and get to the bottom of why those problems are happening and try and just eliminate them. So it may be that you need to add a tool to fix this, or do some extra training, or prevent something from happening, or adding better error messages to your application, for example. But do try and get to the root cause to reduce that strain on the IT service desk as well. Cross training of staff is a really good one as well. So we don't have one or two people that know a system specifically and nobody else knows it. So when those two people are off, or if they leave, you've got a system that's pretty much unsupportable, and it makes it very, very complicated and unmanageable. And of course, automate repetitive tasks. So a good example of this that we use for our customers is we have an automated joiners and leavers process. So that they fill in a form, and what happens is that form goes and creates the user account, notifies the line manager, and sends a temporary password out. Enables that account only on their start date, so they could do it in advance as well. Puts them in the right group, sets their line manager up, etc., etc. Make sure it's got the right licenses, and then kind of the reverse of that when they need to decommission. So that all that automation can save a lot of time, and that's just one example. There's many examples of automation as well. A typical approach for our Azure stuff at least. So our Azure platforms, what we do is make sure we have a good review. So we review of a lot of environments and make sure we understand the current state and the security posture as well, and then kind of make a clear remediation plan on how do we fix those things up and how to optimize it and make it efficient and put everything in the right structure. And that kind of leads on to an Azure landing zone accelerator, so we can put right things that are not correct in the first place, or if it's a greenfield, we can deploy the landing zone accelerator. That makes sure we've got proper organization of our resources, we've got proper governance and guardrails in place, we've got correct access control, networking, automation systems, patching, security services are all enabled by default on the core platform. So when you start putting workloads in there, they're already protected by those governance rules and policies, and also benefit from the automation services that are already put in there. And then how do you make sure you keep your costs low and keep your security tight is by ongoing management. So what we do for our customers is we make sure we check the compliance reporting. So that's kind of company policies, regulatory policies, check compliance against them, check security compliance within Microsoft Defender for Cloud. So it used to be Azure Security Center, make sure with the secure score is being checked and tracked and recommendations are being picked up from there. And also not to mention the cost as well. So we do cost analysis and recommendations again on a monthly basis, and we discuss those with our customers to make sure the platforms always stay up to date and are always highly optimized and cost efficient and secure as well. And it's important to just do that on an ongoing basis, because you can then make sure you're not getting sprawl, making sure you're not wasting any cash, and that your security systems and your scores are always as high as they can be. And on that note, Connor's also created a really good video on managed services, on all the types of things that we check and do on managed services, with some examples of the report with customer details stripped out of it, on cost report, security and compliance reporting there. And we also have tables of the resource, the most expensive resources this month, for example, and we have all that in there as well. So you can see that on our YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe there and look for the Azure Managed Service video there. And that brings us on towards the end. So we've got our new ebook available, so you can download that. Don't forget to follow us on LinkedIn, so you can use that QR code, or just find us on at LA Space Net Limited on LinkedIn. And to get the book, you can use that URL there, or if you just go to our website here shown on the screen, lanet.co.uk, scroll to the bottom of that and you'll see a link to the ebook there. And you can see our website, I think, is on the next slide. Yep. Here's a kind of a launch of our new website. We've had it redone. It's a lot faster. It's kind of gets to the point, and there's lots of places where you can actually contact us. So if you do want to discuss anything that we've talked about today on saving your money in your cloud or keeping it secure, make sure it's aligned with best practices, you can use our experience of building secure, resilient environments for a long time. You can just hit our website, hit the orange button there, and just arrange a call with any of us, and we can then get back to you. Yep. So thanks everybody who watched, and hopefully you found that useful. And thanks, Connor. Well done again. And thanks, Adam, and anyone who's watching live. I hope you have a good weekend. It's Friday afternoon now, and yeah, hopefully that was useful.
Yeah, and like Mitesh says, please reach out to us if any of this has been useful. If you think you need help, you think that we could help you, I'm sure we could help you in some capacity. So yeah, please do reach out, and we'll get back to you.
Thanks, Connor. Right, thanks everybody. Take care. Bye.
Bye.
Thanks, everyone.